Welcome to the Alumni Podcast. We have a very special guest today. I always say that, but like everyone's special in their own way.
Everyone's special. We're all unique snowflakes. We're millennials, Jim. Of course.
Millennials for the win. What's up, Tyler Smith? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. Ready for Christmas. It's coming up. I know you're not supposed to like date podcasts or whatever, but it is close to Christmas time, so I'm looking forward to going back to California and seeing some family. So should be good.
Dude, we're feeling sentimental on this podcast. Our guest today is Jivanto Van Hermit. We will go to him in a second, but T, the floor is yours to start this off, man.
Yeah, Jivanto. So I always like just doing a kind of quick 0 to 10 scale. Like, how would you rate your high school, Santa Monica high school experience? Love it, hate it. 10 is a good score. Like, where would you put yourself? Expectations and reality, I guess, of high school.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to say a solid 7.
Okay.
High school is, as I think about my life thus far, not my favorite period, but also that's kind of what high school is, I think. And I wouldn't have done any of the things afterwards without the experiences in high school. So I can kind of point to that as the starting point for my trajectory.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of trajectories, Jim is about to take you to the Wayback Machine. So hit him with it, Jim. Take him all the way back to high school.
Way back in 2010, Jivanto. I've actually, me and T have known you since middle school, but we won't start there. We'll start graduation day.
I've known him since Smash, since kindergarten.
Whoa.
We go way back, Jim. I don't know about me and Smash.
Fine, you win, Tyler.
I win.
All right. But here's the deal. All right. We were lucky enough to be graduating during a time where the Lakers were in the playoffs and no one was paying attention to us whatsoever. We were lucky enough to have our principal sing us a song in Spanish that most of us don't really know or, have heard before. Okay. We had a performance from a few people of our grade and class, now that I recall, but I can't recall them off the top of my head. And I remember that they didn't give us our degrees. It was a piece of paper that you got when you walked across stage. And when you were done, you had to go grab it. Jivanto, I know you very well. I know you were nervous that day. I know you were kind of apprehensive about your future, thinking deeply, what's the next step? Because I think we've spoken about it senior year once or twice.
Yeah.
Now, that day comes where you shake his hand, that moment comes, and you're done, and it finally hits you. And now 13 years later, after a gap of time where you haven't spoken to me or Tyler, you're sitting here on a podcast, and we just want to know what happened in those 13 years. That's the whole premise of this, and the floor is yours to begin.
Oh gosh. Okay. That's a big question.
Yeah.
A lot's happened in 13 years, not surprisingly.
Right.
Gosh. So I graduated from SAMO and moved cross country for college. I went to a small Mercy Catholic liberal arts school called Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island.
Nice.
And that was kind of the beginning of the next chapter for me. I knew that I wanted new experiences, and I knew that I loved being on the coast. And so I up and went. And Salve was a really fantastic experience for me that in a lot of ways kind of started to set me down a path. It was in college where I figured out that working at colleges is a career and a field, which is where I've spent the last 13 years, and figured out that that's a thing that I want to do and something that I think is worthwhile to spend my time on.
Wow. There's a lot
of expectation. Yeah, an expectation of that's where you'd end up, I guess, going into college, or is really that experience that kind of solidified that for you?
God, yeah. No, I had no idea. I I don't think I even really understood that like that field existed as like a job, right? Like obviously you know that people work at colleges, but you don't really think about it.
Sure.
So I had no inclination that I was heading down that path. I don't know that I really knew at all what I wanted to do, other than like this is the next step and that works okay for me. And really, all the way through since then, I've been really fortunate that the next step has lined up really perfectly, and I've walked into it not always knowing that it was the perfect next step until I looked back and said, "Oh, that worked out really well for me."
That's really awesome. Let's start at the very beginning, though. Let's start at like you moving to Rhode Island. You're a guy from Santa Monica, California. Must have been a big change. Like, what do you first remember about that process?
Yeah, oh, for sure. So I decided to go to Salve without ever having visited the campus, which was
Wow.
very atypical for my peers. Much of the class was from the New England region, not exclusively, but a significant portion of at least the folks that I knew when I first got there were in driving distance of home and family and friends and things that they knew. And I wasn't. And I attribute that to, or that's part of, I think, why I was so invested in my experience in college. Because really it was being like an involved student that led me to figure out this is a thing that I could do as a job. And I think part of that was because it was such a different experience, because I was far away from home and kind of charting a new course. Yeah.
Okay, this is really awesome. So you were actually able to like make friends, it sounds like, and like be involved off the bat. And a lot of people who come on here, like their freshman year, they were not able to do that. So I need to know like what are the secrets? How'd you do it? And like what was the process like to even get involved like in Rhode Island? I'd be apprehensive, Javon. So you know me. I'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Ah, what am I doing?"
I I think it was a lot of good luck, right? Like lots of things aligned for me, and some investment, right? Like I'll start with I selected a school that is small. Salve is like much smaller than Samo, right? We're
Yeah.
2,000 students total at that time, maybe a little bit bigger now. So a pretty small community that I think was helpful on a couple of fronts. One, I started to get to know folks right away because there's only so many people around, right? And two, when I wanted to be really involved, I was only competing against so many folks for any given thing. So I think that was part of it. I think, like I was saying, part of it was I was away from home. And, I kind of looked around and my options were figure this out, make it work, or be really miserable. And I didn't want to do that. I have a distinct memory of my roommate, my first year of college, who was from Long Island. So, like, you could get there, but it wasn't easy.
Mhm.
And he was going home for many weekends, right? Long weekend, he was heading home. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm here figuring it out, right? Like I gotta find something to do, find a way to get connected. And so I think that jump started some of it for me as well. Um, and, and then frankly, I spent a lot of time doing that, right? I was all in on campus. My job was there. All of my extracurriculars were there. Like I spent my life for a number of years in kind of that world. And so that's really what kind of jump started as I got plugged in there.
Can you talk more about what that involvement, you mentioned a little bit, right, with extracurriculars and that kind of thing, but was that being an RA? Was that being in clubs? Was that being in certain other institutions or things on campus? What exactly did involvement look like for you?
Yeah, a little bit of all of the above. So in my first year, I joined student government and our campus programming board, which did like events for folks on campus. And I stayed with those all 4 years. In my second year, I became an RA and continued that all the way through. I was a tour guide during the summer. So like there were lots of ways that I felt very plugged into that community. And I think that was intentional, right? Like the community poured a lot into me, and I wanted to give back to the experience that I was having.
That's very awesome. And I would expect nothing less from you, Jivanto. To be honest with you, I think that's like more of your personality than anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. The essence of who you are in high school kind of carries you over into your adult life a lot of times. That's what I've experienced. But I know you, and I know that you love to read in high school quite a bit. Okay. And my question is, I know that you spent a meticulous time looking into what industry you were going to join after high school. So I want to talk about your major, and I want to talk about like how you decided that you wanted to be in education, and like what was the deciding factors there.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Well, I'm going to start actually where you started, of like in high school, I love to read. And I do still love to read, but I think that love evolved a little bit in college. Because I was exposed to different ways of learning. It wasn't just like I'm gonna sit here in class in high school, write and absorb the information, or read in a book. There was a little bit more variation, and so I think it was through kind of my college experiences that my love of reading evolved to a love of learning. And that really has been foundational for the rest of my life since. I think to answer your question, Jim, like that was the deciding factor of, what's more exciting to spend my career, spend a significant chunk of my life than a place that is devoted to continuous learning and improvement. And I think that was kind of the piece that that did it for me. There is something special about being on a college campus, surrounded by the energy that comes with that, and the creation of knowledge, right, and the learning experience that kind of add that all together. And I can't think of, I have a hard time imagining working in a different environment. The field. So I came up through student affairs, so working in colleges but outside of the classroom. And I'll say our field as a whole, higher education, is kind of a tough sell. You don't get paid a lot. The hours are long. You do some really hard shit, for lack of a better term, and all of that is worth it in my mind, right? Because of the learning, because of the ways in which that job is also really rewarding, and that's why I love what I do.
Wow.
How have you seen that learning, I guess, change since 2020, right? So I feel like a lot of things went online. A lot of things, obviously, we have the dawning of artificial intelligence and stuff like that, or not allowing students to necessarily create entire essays via chatbots and that kind of thing. So what do you see as, the ushering in of technology as it affects maybe the education system or your job specifically, or how has that changed maybe since COVID and the big changing of that?
Yeah, it's been wild. And I'll back up a half step to say, like, the evolution of education well before that, right? Like the part of why I think working in higher education is so interesting is because there is that kind of continuous evolution. I have a colleague that jokes the only constant is change, and I think that's really true. especially in our world and our sphere, but I think also for everyone everywhere. And so I say that to say, certainly things changed more exponentially or dynamically through the pandemic, but adapting to that evolution has always been a part of the work. In all of the different kind of elements of the field that I've worked in, all of the different folks that I've worked with, that's always been a required component, I think. The pandemic turned everything on its head, right? You think about, for many folks, a traditional 4-year residential education where you live in a residence hall and you spend time with people face to face, right? And you go to classes and you go to all the clubs and activities that we were talking about, right? Like none of that really happened for a long time. And so that, dare I say, pivot, right? Or the shift that came with that was, I think, more significant than anything I've ever seen in the field, but also just in life, thinking about the ways that the world changes. And so I think that was true. I was fortunate at that time in my career. I took a pandemic related job. And so like my job came about because of the pandemic. The team of folks that I worked with were all pandemic hires. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. So we were a fully remote team. We were engaged deeply in that work. And so certainly our day-to-day, right, looked very different than what I would have been doing if not that job. And I think the way that I have seen that continue to impact the world and our work and the field since then has also been really interesting, all along the way.
Wow. It really looks like you took a piece of being involved and your love for learning and combined them into a career. And me and Tyler always talk about like pathways into different careers and like why we kind of ended up where we ended up. And it looks like you just kind of put the elements together and it was a no-brainer for you. Is that right?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I don't know that it was always as crystal clear as it feels now looking back.
Okay.
I think there was an element of like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to give this a go. So I said I came up through student affairs, which is true and also kind of a misnomer. My first jobs out of college were in advancement and enrollment management, still the kind of the higher ed sector, but very different jobs from student affairs and kind of what I think of as like the core of my career. And so I learned a lot through that. I wouldn't trade those jobs for anything, but I also wouldn't go back and do them again at this point in my life, right? So I think there's an element of part of my orientation to thinking about the world is that like that's part of the learning process. And so I think that's part of how I see it. And maybe that's part of why like I'm framing it the way that I am of like, yeah, it has all been part of the process. Has it all been rainbows and sunshines and perfects? Not quite. But now looking back, right, I can see how that's all contributed.
Gotcha. So you graduate college, and how did you identify like really like the career you wanted? And like, did you have to go to graduate school? Like, what was your path after college?
Yeah. So Salve has a really awesome program that's like a 4+1. So essentially, I did 4 years of undergrad and overlapped the beginning of a master's in business with the end of my undergraduate program. So I knew that I was sticking around for an extra year because like I planned that into my academic schedule. Simultaneously, I was really fortunate, those jobs that I was talking about in advancement and enrollment management were both at my alma mater. So people that I had worked with as an undergrad, whether that was like student government or volunteering in their office, something, right? I had some connection. Said, hey, Jivanto, I know you're going to be around. We have this position that we need somebody to fill for the next year. You want to jump in and do it? And I said, yeah, that's perfect. And so that was kind of my entree into the field of like, I knew I was going to be there. I did kind of the educational component alongside the work component. And that has also been kind of a pattern in my trajectory since then. So that's kind of where I started out. In student affairs, the like common path is that you go to grad school, a master's program in higher education. So I kind of had the inclination that that was my path. So I left the MBA program, graduated after a year, finished that job that was a year term, and went on to grad school. And that's how I ended up in Ohio. Is I went to grad school at Ohio University and took an assistantship there. So I was working with the student government at Ohio University while going to grad school to study higher ed. And that was my like traditional path for student affairs, higher education. And that's really where I think like my career in earnest began. And I've been in student affairs and student facing or student adjacent roles ever since.
And you're currently in Ohio then, not Rhode Island?
I am in Ohio, yeah. I moved to Athens, Ohio for grad school. I moved to Dayton, worked there for a little bit. Actually from Dayton, moved back to California. This is pandemic time. So I was working for Ohio University, but living in California. And then I've moved back since. Now I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Holy cow. So just to backtrack, you got an MBA in a year, basically a +1 program?
It did. It was great.
Was it fast paced?
It was fast paced, and like some of the classes that I took senior year of college were for the MBA. So like I had a head start. It's not as wild as it sounds, but it was still kept me on my toes.
That was a brilliant move, Jivanto. That type of program is like exciting because like you just basically finished 2 degrees in a span of 5 years. So that sounds pretty cool. And then when you're still in a graduate program currently, right?
Yes. Well, yes, I am in a graduate program. I'll answer that question first. It's not the one that I was just talking about. So the Master's in Higher Ed, that was a 2-year program.
Gotcha.
Finished that. And actually, ironically, just this semester, I went back to school because I work at a college. And so tuition remission, I don't have to pay for it, which makes it a lot easier. So I actually started law school this semester and just finished the fall semester.
Welcome aboard, man.
Thank you.
You're in the worst year. 1L is the worst year.
That's what everyone says. So I'm halfway through the worst part of it.
What's the grand plan, Jivanto? Like, what are we?
Yeah, what are you working towards?
Yeah, that's always the question that people ask when I say that I've started this. I don't really know, to be totally honest. And I'll say, that's a little bit of what I was talking about earlier of like, I look back and like the plan makes perfect sense now, right? Of like, I hit just the right next step each step of the way.
Right.
It was not always clear in the moment. It is distinctly not clear to me now. I think I said I have a really hard time imagining leaving higher education as a field for a lot of reasons. I really enjoy it. And the law is always something that has been interesting to me. When I left high school if you had like pinned me down and said like, what are you going to do? I was going to go to law school after college. And obviously I didn't do that for a long time. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, but there's always been kind of that nagging itch of this is something that is of interest to me. So right now I'm learning and exploring, and I like learning a lot. So that's a good enough reason for me, even though for the average person, they think I've lost my mind. And we'll figure out kind of what the next step is when we get there.
Jivanto, law school for free is a brilliant move. All right.
Yeah.
It's FYI, like it's a good move. It's not. I mean, as long as you're getting it for free, I mean that works. In my book, I can totally see you as a lawyer, Jivanto. I really could.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
It's a compliment. No,
that's a good question. Actually, yeah. That's funny.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Like, who are we litigating? You know, at the end of it.
Fair.
Right.
You know,
is there a particular interest in law right now that you've gravitated towards, Jivanto? Any specific area?
No, not yet. It's still early, and I am very much just getting foundational footing in kind of the field as a whole. I think, again, like I feel really tied to education. It has done really well for me. I think there's really exciting work to be done at the intersection of the law and higher education that my experiences and hopefully current and future experience will lend themselves to.
Right.
So that's, I think, kind of my default setting. That's what I'm thinking about right now. And like I said, I'm really open to seeing where the world takes me because I've been on a pretty good ride so far.
Yeah, looking at your educational history, like you don't have to be like an associate at a law firm to get the most out of your degree. Like you could do a plethora of things because you have an MBA. If you have a law degree, you have a degree in higher education. So I mean, you have like doors open to you to kind of rather mix it up or not, or whatever you really want to do. I mean, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah, we'll see.
That's the master plan. What's the worst thing about law school? Because I just have to know. Like, what do you hate about it, and what do you love about it?
So I really like learning. I'm just gonna sound like a big old nerd. So I really enjoy the classes, by and large, right? Like there are elements of everything that I'm like, take or leave. The thing that is most challenging for me right now is that there's just not enough time in the day. In part because I'm going to law school full time and working full time. So like I did this to myself. I know that. And in part because I want to dig deeper, right? Like there are some days where I look around and I'm like, I did an okay job at work. I did an okay job at class. I did a so-so job at home. And like, I didn't do great at anything. And right, like, again, that's a choice that I made. And most days I'm really happy with it. But if I had to point to one thing that I'm like, I wish I could change this, it would be a few more hours in every day so that I could read a little bit more closely or think a little bit more deeply or be a better partner or dog dad or employee, right? Or whatever the thing is.
What are some of your go-to de-stress events or activities that you like to do maybe after a long day of work or law school? Anything you gravitate towards fitness-wise, or like you said, maybe hanging out with the dog? Anything specific you go to?
Yeah, Rose is a wonderful de-stressor. This is my office when I'm working from home. She typically sits right behind me. She's not here tonight because sometimes she will decide that I just need a break and she'll come up under my arm and say, hey, which I thought was maybe not a good look for filming a podcast. So she's downstairs right now, but she is absolutely a great de-stressor. Over the summer, I took up rowing, which I have found incredibly cathartic. I think one of the things that I am constantly seeking is like a state of flow where like I can be really invested in what I'm doing in that moment and focused, and not thinking about other things because I've got lots of things going on, right? I find it really easy to kind of do one thing and think about another thing. And so rowing has been really nice in that I have to focus to not end up in the water. Maybe because I'm not very good at it yet, but that has been really great exercise. And I enjoy being out on the water, and kind of that new experience has been a lot of fun.
Can you do that in the winter as well? Is it a full year-round sport, or no, not so much?
Not on the water. So our dock is closed for the season. I am currently in the process of figuring out like what is the winter version of that activity. We've got an indoor gym, right, with like a rower. That doesn't really have the same appeal for me. So we'll see kind of what the winter version of that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So going back into what you were saying, like you kind of feel like a jack of all trades. Like you feel like some days you're a so-so partner, a so-so law student, an average. Like I realized that one, you're gonna have to be very meticulous with your time because you're working full time and going to law school, and that's very hard to do. You know, just like most people who have done it that I know did a part-time law school program and a full-time work schedule, and that kind of worked for them. But for you, it's going to be a little bit more fast-paced and difficult. And I think it's okay to be an average when you're juggling too many hats at once, and it's a period of time in life. I think it's okay to be average at everything, you know, or even
Fair.
a little below average at some things and some days, and above average, on some days. It's fine.
Hope it balances out.
Yeah, hopefully it balances out. So I just, I know the stress involved with law school, and I just I empathize with that, Jivanto. I really do. So wish
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Gotcha. Any plans to move back to California? Or are you happy exploring Ohio, or maybe going back to one of the previous states you were in?
Yeah. No plans to move back. My partner and I bought a house about a year ago, and we've done enough work in this house that I constantly tell him that we are never moving because moving is terrible, and we've invested here in a lot of ways. And I really enjoy living in Cincinnati. I think Ohio gets a bad rap from coastal folks, but it's been a really great experience for me. And it means that it's possible for me to travel and come back to visit Santa Monica or go out to Rhode Island or elsewhere with some degree of regularity. Law school's thrown a wrench into that. But up until law school, we were back on one of the coasts somewhat regularly. And I really appreciate the ability to be able to do that.
Solid. What does the next 10 years look like for you, Jivanto? Like if you had your way and, you can just kind of like pin the story down and just everything just goes your way for the next 10 years. What does your life look like?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, for the next 4 years, I'm going to be in law school. So like,
fair enough.
That's what it looks like. Nothing new. I keep doing the job that I'm doing. Keep going to school. Stay afloat. The next 4 years don't look particularly exciting. After that, hopefully we'll plan a wedding. We've been engaged for a bit now, and I said really clearly, like, I don't want to plan a wedding while I'm in law school. So it's going to be a long engagement, and so hopefully shortly after law school there's a wedding. And after that, great question. I don't know. So I accounted for a couple of years there, but I don't know what will take me to 10.
You gave me 4 years. I'll take it.
4 years really clear.
Yeah. Have there been a 2020 reunion? Do you think you would have went for the Samuel like in-person reunion?
Yeah, I mean, I was there, right? Like I was in Santa Monica at that point. It would have been really easy. 2020 was such a like wild time in people's lives. I don't think I even really recognized like our 10-year had come until it had gone, right? Like it was like years later where somebody was saying something and they were like, how long ago did you graduate? And I did the math and I was like, oh shit, like when did that happen? So I don't think it even registered in my head, but had something, right, like kind of brought it to the forefront. Yeah.
Man, that is crazy. Your story, Jivanto, is like a lot of school, and you know, do you like think about like what life is like? Because after law, I think after you get a law degree, I think you're probably done with schooling, right?
Maybe.
Lifelong learner over there, man. He's gonna do PhD in something.
Yeah, don't get.
Yeah.
I think I'll be done for a while, at the very least.
Okay. What does your life look like? Just working, or have you thought of that yet, or no?
Yeah, a little bit. I took gosh, darn near a decade between when I finished my last master's and starting law school. So like I've had some time to just kind of live and be and work and live life. And I think the early part of that, the early part of my career, I invested a lot into my work in not particularly healthy workaholic tendency kind of ways. And part of what I found really beneficial out of the pandemic, in part, is that that catapulted my journey of balancing my life a little bit better forward in some really intense ways. And something that I had been working on leading into the pandemic, recognizing like this way that I have balanced my life is not really sustainable. It's not value driven for me. And so some things need to change. But the pandemic was really helpful in setting some of those priorities. I think remote work was useful for me in that I had to learn the work is here. Like it's literally sitting on my desk. It will always be there and I can always do it. I shared that I worked on a team that was dedicated to pandemic response management. And so the remote nature and the sheer volume of work, right? Like I could have literally worked 24 hours a day for however many days in a row I could sustain that and still not be caught up. And so there was some element there of like something clicked for me of like, oh, no one's going to take care of me if I don't take care of me. And so that kind of helped me make some of that shift. I was home in California because my mother was having some health issues at that time. And so that also, right, was a piece of perspective of like, life is short, right? Like these are the things that really matter. And spending time with loved ones at that point in my life became much more important than working. And so like all of these factors, right, that started to balance that out for me. I think before I started law school, I had it, right? Like I had a balance that I felt really good about. Obviously, it looks a little bit different now, but I'm still happy with the balance. Is it perfect? No. But I'm like really happy with where I am. And part of that is kind of striking what that balance looks like. And it feels solid.
Hearing that makes us happy, honestly.
Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jivanto's got a big energy of like letting the universe kind of decide. He's not. I would have assumed Jivanto's like this type A, like he's in law school right after college already, like PhD, all this stuff. But like talking to you now, it's like, man, like he's just kind of like, yeah, I seemed like I needed to be here at this time, and I reached out to my network, and it seemed like that was the appropriate next step. And I think there's a big sense of maturity in the way you're describing how the blocks have stacked to this point, which is really impressive, to be honest. You obviously reiterated on the fact of always learning, that kind of thing. I'm always curious what people are currently reading. If there's any books, law school's taking up probably 99% of your thought space with reading, but I'm always curious if there's been an impactful book you've read maybe the last 6 to 12 months, or what's on your bookshelf that maybe has influenced your thinking in the last.
Dude, he's reading Paul's Graph and he's reading Torts. Understanding Torts, he's reading, man.
I know it's probably sad at the moment, but do you have any like hobby of pursuing reading at the moment?
Yeah, I think Jim's point is a fair one. I've not done really a lot of interesting reading for the average consumer in some time, but there's kind of two books that I'll point to. One that I read a long time ago and revisited somewhat regularly before law school is The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal. It is kind of a book in two parts, and I think there's been new versions since then. The first half is the author telling his story, his experience as an individual that was pulled out of a work camp during the Holocaust and brought to the bedside of a dying SS soldier, who, long version short, I'm not spoiling anything, the soldier essentially says, "Can you forgive me?" And that's kind of where the first half leaves off. The second half is a series of essays from thought leaders, politicians, religious leaders, so on and so forth, responding to that question of like, what does it mean to forgive? Can you forgive? Should you forgive? And I think that has been a really poignant book. I read it years ago, maybe even in high school, but I have revisited it a number of times since then because I think it forces me to think through some of the like fundamental questions of life that I enjoy, right? Like, and I think that's a useful exercise. The second book that I'll point to is ironically sitting right here on my desk, and it has been sitting there since before law school. I've made it, to Jim's point, not very many pages into this. And this is All About Love by Bell Hooks, which is I think a dense read, but related in kind of that same vein of prompting some thinking around like what those fundamental important things are in our lives. And love for me is one that I continuously come back to, right? And think is important in all of our relationships. And so Bell Hooks is a great read on lots of fronts, but this All About Love has been something that I'm excited to dig into, hopefully over the holidays, winter break a little bit.
Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic with forgiveness, and especially in culture today, because we're living through cancel culture, and I feel like we have a very short leash on a lot of people, and deciding what an appropriate apology is for certain things people say online, or I think we lose a lot of context with so much of our communication being digital now that it's hard to really get intonation and what people are really trying to say. So I do think it is interesting when you frame it, or there's a book, with an SS officer, and can he be forgiven for the things he's done? I'd be like, if you could forgive that guy, then we could forgive a lot of the Twitter nonsense going on today too. So it's interesting.
I'm totally gonna read that. That's a good book. I've known Jivanto for a while. Tyler's known Jivanto for a while. Let's get into some set segments here because I'm curious to kind of bring Jivanto back. You know what I mean? It's been a long time since we were at Samo. Tyler, what was your first memories of Jivanto, or like what do you remember him for back in the day?
I think it must have been at Smash. Probably one of the first ones was we used to have this thing called Writer's Workshop. I don't know if you remember that at all.
Yeah.
It was just like a creative writing class, and I always knew, I think at that moment, Jivanto was going to be an author or something, intellectual, because he would just be in Writer's Workshop from minute 0 to minute 60, just writing nonstop, right? So I was like, I don't know what to think. I have writer's block as like a 6-year-old. I have writer's block, and Jivanto's just going, just like taken off writing novels as a kindergartner. I was like, wow, this guy's on another level. So I do remember that.
I wish that had stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Something about the writing, and just I could tell this guy was on an intellectual different level from an early age, for sure. What about you, Jim?
Dude, I still have writer's block. That's crazy. My first memories of Jivanto, or like my best memories of Jivanto, was he was reading a book by David Baldacci. And the only reason why I know that author is because he would read it all the time. And I'd be like messing with him, trying to like get him to like distracted, but he was clearly embedded in like whatever this writer was writing. And I think Jivanto remembers this because like it was like a PE or something, but I just wanted like to banter with Jivanto. Like that's all I really wanted to do. So
Right.
I was just trying to get this guy's attention, and he was like embedded in this book, and that was pretty much our our friendship at that
It all
time.
checks out. Yeah.
But I had fond memories of you, and I don't know if you remember Mark Yusuf, and like the three of us were like in a class together, and we were just messing around the whole time. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, those are some good
Do you
times.
still read David Baldacci books, Jivanto?
You know, I haven't. I remember them fondly. I have not read one in a number of years, probably since high school.
Nice.
But I remember not the specific book, but I remember the author that you're talking about and being very entrenched in the stories that he would weave. So that 100% tracks.
Absolutely. Tyler's about to do some spit fire rapid questions to try to get you back in that mode. What do you remember best about high school? Like what was your fondest memories back then?
I think the memories that are most salient for me from high school are around choir. I was a choir nerd all through middle school, high school, and into college. And I think what I remember most about that from high school is the like emotion that is tied to music for me and for lots of people. And I think that's why those memories are so salient, right? Like there are specific songs, specific experiences where I felt like I was in touch and in tune with my emotions in a way that I don't think a high schooler typically is. And I don't think I'm particularly good at doing that, generally speaking. But those really stand out to me as like there was some synergy there.
I was in those choir classes with you, Miss Blanchard.
Yeah.
We had some good times. It comes up on this podcast so many times with different people that were in that class.
Yeah.
We just had Mikey Smith on, who like used to lead us in warm-ups during those sessions, and we were just kind of talking about it last time.
That's so funny. What a small world.
Yeah.
Is there anyone from Samuel you still connect with, maybe via phone or social media, anything, Jivanto, today?
No, I've been really terrible about keeping in touch with folks. I think I didn't really think about it even. I like left and did college and did my own thing. And like it wasn't until much more recently in life that I'm like, oh, I wish I had, kept in better touch with folks. My partner Matthew has like a group of friends from childhood that are still friends. And so like when I see them get together, I'm like, oh, I wish I had some of that. And I don't really. I've been terrible about keeping in touch with folks.
Yeah, I think it's really definitely important to have that 1 to 3 people that have known you for decades, right? And can call you on your bullshit and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of nice to have some of those. But sometimes life happens. You've been a busy guy in the last 13 years. So that's definitely understandable. But yeah, like Jim said, I'll hit you with some of the lightning round questions. 6 questions here, kind of more specific to high school, and they're fun, but should be interesting. So the first one is best off-campus lunch spot.
Oh gosh. I don't think it was there during high school. But I grew up right across the street, so I'm still in the neighborhood. It's
Right.
Pita Pit now, is in that little complex corner there.
Fair.
Right.
Fair answer.
Yeah, I think Jim loves this place. What's it called? Kava? Is that what you go to, Jim?
I go to Kava, which is similar to Pita Pit.
Yeah.
But my favorite at Samo is also gone. It was La Taqueria. It was like
Oh, classic.
Yeah. There is.
Too good.
Is there any good Mexican food in Ohio, Jivanto? Probably not.
It depends on what you mean by good. No is the short answer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Fair
That's
enough.
why I couldn't live in Ohio. There's just I'm too
It's not
Food,
like
food.
being at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Hardest class you took at Samo.
Oh gosh. I don't think I could tell you a single class that I took. I mean, like,
Were you a
that
big
sounds
AP
terrible.
guy? Did you take like AP history and all that stuff?
I took a couple.
You took
Um,
Jivanto, you don't remember?
really?
Yeah.
He breezed through it. He got a 5 on all.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure I repressed that memory because I did not breeze through that.
Well,
Yeah, that sounds rough. Question 3. Which year of high school would you most like to relive? If you could wake up and just restart that whole year.
Literally none of them. I
How
would
much
not
would
go
someone
back
have
to high
to pay
school.
you? How much does someone have to pay you to wake up as a freshman tomorrow? Like 50 grand?
A freshman in high school?
High school.
No, like generational wealth kind of money. I don't know. I'd have to ask somebody how to calculate that, but it would have a lot of zeros.
That's
some
amazing.
people would do it for free, Jivanto.
I think Mikey said he would relive high school tomorrow. Like Mikey loved it. I was like, damn. Jivanto wants generational wealth. That's incredible.
That's a high price, but I respect it.
I respect that answer right there. Stick to your guns, Jivanto. I like that. Best restroom on campus to take a dump. I don't know.
Gosh, I don't know. I can't even like remember where the restrooms were.
That's fair. That's a very offhand question. We'll let you pass on that one. Best
We'll give
teacher
you the
you had in high school. Best teacher.
I'll have to say Mr. Holes, who was the choir director teacher at that point.
Very cool. And then being a music guy, this will be good for you. What song from our high school era is still on your iPod?
Oh god.
Throwbacks.
Yes, but they're all like nerdy choir songs. So like this is not interesting to anyone, but literally just today I was talking about a song that I first learned of when we sang it in choir. It's a beautiful love song called A Boy and a Girl by Eric Whitacre. And it tells this story of how this boy and girl love each other and how their love like evolves over time. So it like uses citrus as a metaphor. I'm gonna get this somewhat correct. But like their love starts as like oranges because everybody loves oranges and they're sweet and easy. And then in the next chapter of life, it evolves to lemons, which are a little bit more of a like refined palate. There's still stuff to love there, but it takes a little bit of effort, right? People think about it differently. And then in the third chapter of their life, their love is compared to limes, and kind of thinking of like those are a very different taste than the oranges. Anywho, this is not really what you asked. So that's the song that's still on my iPod. I listened to it with some regularity and literally was talking about it this morning.
That was deep. That was deep.
That was deep. I was like, dang, lemons. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That is beautiful. Jim, hit him with the final plugs here and let him see them all.
Yes, sir. The floor, Jivanto, is about to be yours. For you to basically tell our peers or anyone listening a message, what you want them to know, anything you want, really. The floor is absolutely yours. And see, I'm actually going to play Feeding the Ducks for this one. I'm
Do it, brother.
I'm going to put the volume low, and I'm going to let
Little like background soundtrack we got on StreamYard. It's awesome. It's so awesome.
Right. It's the best
love
song
it.
I've ever heard. It's called
We
Feeding
should
the
always
Ducks.
close with Feeding the Ducks, Jim. This is a good segment. I like that. Power move.
And the floor is yours, Jivanto.
I think there's really just two things that jump to mind for me. That be kind to people and do what makes you happy.
Okay.
Those are my takeaways.
Wow.
Succinct.
That was
Future
very
high
simple.
schoolers, do those two things and you'll be in a good spot no matter what. I like that. Be kind and pursue happiness. Okay. All right.
That there's nothing more to be said. You know, that's what
it.
it is. Jivanto, we really enjoyed this.
Mhm.
We were happy to have you on. Is there anyone that you want us to bring on? Is there any person that you want to name drop or challenge to come on the pod?
Mr. Halls.
Oh, what interesting. Yeah, I mean, that would be
I don't know if we can.
I don't know what he's
Professors
doing.
on here one day, Jim. We should.
Yeah, we should try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. I didn't know I was going to get this question. I'm going to think on that. I might send you all some names.
Yeah, you know,
Really
send
cool.
us email or some names and challenge somebody for the next episode. We'll reach out to them. We'll reach out to them and we'll try to get
I love it.
All right, and just like that, that was the Alumni Podcast. Love.
Thanks for listening. Appreciate you. Thanks again, Jivanto.
Thanks.